Yuji Itadori is immortal, Nobara is still alive, Cross's life hangs in the balance, Sugi has disappeared, and Yuka Rikatsu is shown up to the plate to go and fight Dabura. Lots to talk about, let's get into it.
Like, I hate wasted potential. That shit crushes your spirit. It really does. It crushes your spirit.
First things first, as always, if you've not already, consider liking and subscribing. Go follow me on Instagram. See all sorts of cool JJK cult runs and artwork. And that being said, it's time to talk about Cross. Coming off the back of chapter 12 here, where Cross was unfortunately shot twice by this absolute goober. Leave it to the humans to just start an absolute space war with aliens as soon as they meet them. Anyways, it turns out that Cross isn't doing good at all. In fact, Dabura is of the belief that Cross will actually die and he won't last long with his injuries. Now, I'm sure you're all sat here wondering why the Cimmerians, or even Dabura as a discontent, simply just doesn't use reverse curse technique on these guys to help him. Well, I'm also wondering the same thing, and I do potentially have some answers here, as we're all well aware now that the discontents and the Rumelians, they have key differences, with the one being how their eyes are positioned, and then two, the discontents have horns, and these key biological differences might be why Cross isn't able to be healed by Dabura himself. Dabura may well know some sort of reverse curse technique, but quite simply isn't able to apply it to Cross's biology. And as for everyone else, it's possible none of the other warriors are even able to perform RCT, hence why Cross is sort of laid up on what seems to be life support equipment from the spaceship that they're on. Something similar is actually mentioned in this same chapter a little bit later on, as we're introduced to this character who takes us through the following information. She couldn't have healed Cross based on the fact that severe loss of tissue and internal organ damage is simply too much for her to heal, and she notes that given Cross's position as one of the top sorcerers for the Cimmerians, the shots that hit him must have hit vital organs and have incapacitated him instantly. But she also mentions how the Cimmerians may also have a unique anatomy, and this is something that was brought up earlier on in the series when Usami actually offered to heal Maru after his fight, with Cross actually refusing, Usami thinking, oh, maybe he doesn't want us learning their biology, which again, in hindsight, now feels like such a long time ago, and potentially if Cross had said, yeah, maybe the guys on Earth might have been able to save his life, which I think is, you know, it's kind of funny, but again, that was just a mere 6 chapters ago, I think, but that, like, the whole status quo of the series was so vastly different from all involved just 6 chapters ago, which really goes to show you just how quick Gege is moving through this series. But regardless, Cross's condition will serve as the spark for an all-out battle, which brings me around to another topic. Sugi as a character is one who's almost ran parallel in Cross to a way here, where Maru and Yuka have strived for sort of peace and coexistence. Sugi and Cross at the beginning of the stories were sort of at odds, and they were very suspicious of each other's motives and obviously each other's species essentially. And in the same chapter we see Cross laid up in an ICU. We're only given a brief showing of Sugi. Now I'm just going to say this section of the video is purely speculative from yours truly, but Sugi not being shown after the events of Usami and the backlash of his care speech seemed extremely interesting to me. One, based on his reaction, and because once again Gege chooses to have a 2-month time skip within this chapter. And for those of us who remember old school JJK, you remember how much 1 month of time skip did within Jujutsu Kaisen. I think we should be rightfully terrified for what might have occurred within 2 months. Within these 2 months, we know that Jujutsu sorcerers continue to exercise Care Spirits in spite of the requests of Cimmerians to halt that process, and on the same hand, Care Spirits manifested harder in the winter, making the level of danger rise with it. Now, if Gege is willing to off-screen Gojo, it's entirely possible that he would do the exact same to Sugi. Again, this is all speculation, but how does Yuka and her face go from this to this? There are many options here, all speculative again, but Mahito getting to Sugi is an option. Maru losing his temper against someone he knows wasn't exactly a fan of his brother is an option. Sugi dying in a mission against Care Spirits is also an option. Either way, something has potentially happened within these 2 months for Sugi to have not been shown after the time skip, and also not been chosen to fight against Dabura, despite being the strongest sibling. I mean, yeah, sure, he doesn't have Chaos Energy, fair enough, very valid point, but everyone in this series has talked about how they've seen the records of how people fought against Sukuna. They're well aware that Maki done severe damage to Sukuna. They're well aware of this, so why wasn't he picked? And I think it would just be that type of Gege storytelling, that type of suffering to set up 2 siblings with goals of surpassing each other, only for one to bite the dust early and not be able to complete that goal. Anyways, just let me know what you guys think in the comments down below, because again, I could be overreacting, I could just be very skeptical, I could just be very traumatized from previous JJK here, but I've got a feeling something's going on. But now it's really time to talk about Deborah. Similar to Sugi, Deborah is a character that has come completely out of left field and caught me very much off guard, and I think he caught a lot of the community off guard. This guy is potentially the most violent pacifist I think I've ever seen, ever. This dude arrived to the scene of the crime and asked simply 2 questions, and then ripped this goober's arm clean off before cursed speech could even get a hold of him. Now, let me just break this down real quick, because if I'm understanding this correctly, Usami arrives, cursed speech is spoken, and either right after it or exactly at the same time, Deborah takes this dude's arm off, and then proceeds to further ignore Usami's command, and the recoil from that has then hospitalized Usami. Now again, we've seen something similar happen with Inumaki and Sukuna, except the recoil didn't put Inumaki in hospital. Again, I keep going on about this, take a shot every time I talk about cycles within Jujutsu Kaisen, but this Modulo series is definitely hitting the same beats over and over again. It's a very real thing that is going on here, and Deborah is causing this kind of recoil on a cursed speech user, and then Deborah being compared to a walking calamity is all things that we've seen before. Quote, Usami is a grade 1 sorcerer, so am I. But if I had to face Deborah, my only choice would be to run, and depending on his true nature, I might even have to alter for myself. His power can't be measured by the sorcerer ranking system. He's a walking calamity. Now, to my recollection here, there has been only one other being within this series that has been compared to a calamity, and then he truly lived up to that name, and that was Sukuna Ryuma. That is also a name that has been thrown about since the series started, and has obviously been compared to a lot others within the series here. That is obviously a name that has been thrown about since the series started, and has been compared to Deborah since the series started. Now, in terms of power, Gege is being pretty in our face that Deborah and Sukuna are in leagues of their own. Maybe they're not equals, but they're definitely in leagues of their own. However, when it comes to their characters, they're worlds apart. As I mentioned before, Deborah is potentially the most powerful and most violent pacifist I think I've come across. Deborah right now is in this very interesting predicament. He doesn't want to fight, nor does he want war, but he's upholding that promise to protect the Remillions, and at the same time of all of this, Deborah is now witnessing a battle on 2 different planets happening because of Kallians or cursed spirits. Remember, Deborah is from the Disgunten tribe. He has no loyalty to these cursed spirits or to Kallians, and in all probability sees what the humans are doing as beneficial to their race and potentially to his own people, but due to his promise to Jura and to Cross and to Maru, he's fighting for the Sumerians, for their future, for them to claim a place on Earth. Which brings me around to Yuji. In true Jujutsu Kaisen fashion, a showdown has been issued and organized between Deborah and Yuka Akatsu. Now, before we talk about that duel, we need to talk about some important factors leading up to this duel here and how it might potentially impact the duel. And that is Yuji Itadori and Nobara Kugisaki. Now, in this little exchange, we are seeing Jujutsu headquarters sort of discussing who they should send to the duel. Quote, nominating anyone but Yuji Itadori to duel Deborah would be out of the question. This little statement alone tells us so much about Yuji's growth and his powers and how much he has grown into a sorcerer that these guys believe he is the only acceptable, reasonable choice to send against Deborah. Now, I've talked about cycles so much within the series that you guys are probably sick to the back teeth of it, but let me reiterate something here. In the final chapters of Jujutsu Kaisen, Gojo told Yuji the following, quote, I want you to carry on my dream, should anything happen to me. But if this is where I bow out, there'll be a point where you guys grow further than I ever did, right? And now, some decades later, Yuji Itadori is that guy. He is that man that Gojo wanted him to become. But in doing so, Yuji unintentionally has sort of fulfilled the role of Gojo, finding nothing but loneliness and death along the path that he has taken. In the same way that Yuji has filled Gojo's shoes, we also find ourselves at a point where Jujutsu Society must defend itself from an overwhelming calamity, and there's this race against time to find Yuji in order to do that, in a very similar fashion to how old Jujutsu High were racing to unseal Gojo. And back then, they thought that if they could just free Gojo, everything would be okay. And now, it's if they can just find Yuji Itadori, everything will be okay. But things are certainly not okay. We get this haunting, I think, for Yuji's character exposition confession from Nobara herself, where she explains the following. The last time I saw him was at Hannah's funeral, and he said he wouldn't be going to any more funerals. He might look like a big musclehead, but he's surprisingly sensitive, you know. He just can't bear to see anyone else off. And I don't think he ever imagined not being able to fulfill his grandfather's dying wish like this. It's getting a little rough on me too. After all, he can't age, you know. Now, this statement alone gives us so much information on Yuji and what he's been through in the decades that have passed. First of all, Yuji not being able to age is a simply horrific fate for him. In chapter 1, Yuji's grandfather told him to help people because he is strong, and strong he has become, perhaps even the strongest. He possibly stands in a trio of only 3 people on this series right now that have claimed a rank outside of special grade here. His grandpa has also told him that when he dies, to die surrounded by people, which for Yuji has sort of become perhaps a paradoxical statement. Let's say Yuji has become just as strong as Gojo or Sukuna. That means he is far, far beyond many people, far beyond anyone who can kill or defeat him. Meaning the task of helping people because he is strong will continue until someone eventually does kill him. And it's not likely that he's going to do it himself because he has to help people. That's his case. That's what he's doing now. In fact, the only time he considered this as an option to end himself was when he housed Sukuna, and that action into him would have helped people. But because Yuji can't age, he's trapped in this cycle of helping people, fighting for them, only to then outlive them. And in doing so, he's outliving the very people that he has saved, unable to eventually die himself. Gege Akatami has truly put our boy through some serious suffering. Now, on the other hand of this, we have Yuka Akatsu, who is now stepping up to the plate to go and fight Deborah. Again, this girl is terminally ill. Whether she wins or loses this fight, she's still going to end up dying. And this could be her thing where I want to go out in a blaze of glory. Perhaps I can make a name for myself here and do this. But again, 2 months have passed, and the last time that we saw Yuka, Tsurugi, and Maru, they were all, oh, I'll see you guys tomorrow. And now look at the expression on Yuka's face. That's an expression that of someone who's been through some stuff. And whatever it is, I'm sure Gege is going to really hit us home with it. But again, cycles, because this is very, very reminiscent of Gojo going to fight Sukuna, except obviously it's Yuka in this turn, even though Yuji is sort of filling in the shoes of Gojo. Lots of interesting stuff happened with this series, and I genuinely believe that all of the source material that Gege has laid before us, all 170-odd chapters of it, he's really elevating it. He's really going back and looking at stuff and taking his time to sort of recontextualize a lot of it. And while all of this is happening, Mahito is still lurking about somewhere. Somewhere, somehow, Mahito is going to appear in this manga and do something horrific. Somewhere, somehow, in this manga, Yuji is going to appear and do something crazy.